I went into this show with cautious optimism. The trailers look pretty good, aside from a few CGI issues that were prevalent throughout the show that I won't have time to touch on here. Almost every character looked and even sounded like their TV show counterparts. Almost. They did leave the production, but the original showrunners were part of the show, at least in the beginning. Then we started to get more and more news about certain changes that they started to do for the show. It made me more and more nervous, but after the M. Night Shyamalan movie that had me almost walk out the movie theater, it couldn't be that bad, could it?
I can't believe it's really you. How is this possible? How are you here?
Well,
There's enough material here that I could make a multi-hour series on the problems with the show, so it has made the process of writing the script exceptionally difficult in how I should structure it. But I decided to focus on what I think is the worst aspect of the show, which ends up highlighting many other issues, and that is the character rewrites and outright assassinations. But before we go into what they did in the live action series, let's remind ourselves real quick and set the stage of the original show of Avatar: The Last Airbender. The show came out in the early 2000s and was one of the biggest cultural phenomenons we had as children. I'm gonna bring this back up at the end of this video in a really depressing way, so stick around for that. It was a fantasy show that took place in its own world, and while there's a lot of inspiration that was drawn from ours, it was, for all intents and purposes, devoid about politics, customs, cities, people, whatever else. It was a land that you could completely escape to, with its own rules and laws governing every aspect of life. Between the show, sequel, comics, and everything else, the Avatar fanbase feels like the show is still airing weekly with how active they have been. I used to do something when I worked at conventions, where I would have a secret tea, the White Lotus, that I would only give to people cosplaying as Avatar characters who would check out my booth. This was between 2016 and 2020, and I had to stop because there were just too many. Compare that to many of today's fan bases. There's an endless amount of shows that are labeled as peak as they are airing, but everyone forgets all about them once the new season of anime or whatever else comes out. And I understand this. There is a reason this show has stuck around for so long. One of the wonderful things about this show is how it's written in a way that enchants and grabs hold of every generation, young and old alike. There was action, violence, the pain of loss, even carefully structured death that made it suitable for the younger generation that still got the message across.
did Jet just die? You know, it was really unclear.
It's not every day that you get a show that has genocide and death that you'd be excited to show to your 8-year-old cousin and his parents. So how does the Netflix show handle this careful balance of childlike wonder and serious topics?
Because it is our time.
They don't. I wonder just what the hell the showrunners meant when they said they wanted to make this show please Game of Thrones fans. Apparently they meant gratuitous, over-the-top violence. I love violent shows in their proper place. There's an anime airing right now called Ninja Kamui. The violence is over the top, and it too sets some people on fire. But that's not this show. That's not Avatar. You don't need to show people burning alive. You don't need to hear their screams and sufferings. This is a problem throughout the entire show. There is almost zero comedy, zero jokes, zero things to make me smile or laugh. Almost the entire thing, from start to finish, is serious business. That was one of the core aspects of the original that made it so loved, the way it was able to blend its comedy into the serious moments. It's part of Aang's entire character, and we'll get to him in just a bit. But I guess they had to cut the happy moment in order to show people burning alive. I expect fatalities to happen in Mortal Kombat. I don't wish to see them in Street Fighter 6. The need for shock value also managed to ruin one of the minor but very important characters. In the original, Monk Gyatso was shown having died while taking out dozens of Fire Nation soldiers all around him, showing that he must have been a really powerful bender. That doesn't happen here. Instead, a single soldier burns him alive in front of a bunch of children. They made him look weak. The idea of showcasing the initial attack on the air nomads was a good idea, but they ruined it, to the point where the consequences are felt throughout the entire show. And nothing better showcases this than the main character, Aang. Let's go down the list of changes to his origin story. First, do you remember how in the original story, one of the core driving points for Aang was that he never wanted to be the Avatar? And when he found out he'd be taken away from Monk Gyatso, that's what caused him to fly off? How one of his main character arcs in his hero's journey is coming to grips with him being the Avatar? Well, not in this show. When he found out he was the Avatar, he was more so just taken aback. There was no flurry of emotions. Instead, he flew off on Appa in order to clear his head. That's it. He never ran away. When the storm got bad, he said let's turn back, but by that point it was too late. He never began his character journey of having to accept that he was the Avatar. On top of this, while he was still in his own time, he was made aware of the Fire Nation and the war. That's right, the war did not start with a surprise attack on the air nomads. The war had already begun by that point. So when he came out of the iceberg, he already knew to some extent what was going on. So you may be wondering, what is Aang's character arc now that he no longer is battling with the fact that he's the Avatar? Good question. The closest that I can come to is that, when speaking to Kyoshi, Roku and Kuruk, oh yeah, Roku is no longer his guide and mentor. He's now got as much importance as Kuruk. When speaking to the Avatars, they all had some way of telling him that he had to carry all his burdens alone, and he had to wrestle with that, I guess. But it wasn't much of a wrestling match. The power of friendship kept winning every time. What else is different with Aang? Well, he's happy sometimes, and occasionally does show that he is a kid. But with the whole running away from his destiny thing being thrown out the window, he doesn't try to goof off or have fun. He's mainly serious business mode and accepting of his mission. At what point does a character stop being that character? Aang is right on the cusp of this question and can be a legitimate topic of debate. I can't hit every single point for every single character or we'll be here all day. And believe me, there are many minor interactions that Aang just does not feel like Aang. For example, he now knows how to fly. Suck it, Zahir. So I will only focus on the bigger points. Sokka. In the original, he was sexist, and part of his character growth was him realizing his sexist ways were not good. The showrunners took that out because of modern audiences. What did they replace it with? Him just being a straight up unlikable dick. When Aang came out of the iceberg, he wanted to leave him to die. When Zuko showed up, he wanted to just hand Aang over. When they escaped Zuko and made it to the air temple, he wanted to abandon Aang again and go back home. When he met Suki, with the sexism gone, what did they have to work with? Nothing. Sokka was only kind and polite. He was basically a simp for her. But that's still not good enough, because when he referred to her as a warrior from the get-go, she took offense to this, because she's not just a warrior, she's a Kyoshi warrior. Also, Suki was down bad for Sokka. It wasn't subtle. She wanted that boomerang to come back, and come on her back. Speaking of Suki, real quick, they changed her character too. In the original, she was content to guarding her village and her village alone, but Aang and friends convinced her and the other Kyoshi warriors to get out and help how they can with the war front. In the show, Kyoshi showed signs of a 40-year-old wine mom, wanting to go out and explore the world and find herself. This one I'll chalk it up to personal taste. I can see how someone might like that change, but I don't think they pulled it off well. And I didn't like it. Back to Sokka. In the original, he was frequently used as a comedic punching bag. Here, he was just used as a punching bag. The comedy was gone. Two events stick out in my mind. The first is when he has a vision of the past. Oh yeah, visions happen, including Aang having a vision of the future, and that's why they were headed to the Northern Water Tribe. But anyway, in the original, Sokka never had a right of manhood, until Bato took him on one during Season 1. In this show, Sokka already took his right of manhood, but only passed due to pity, as Bato and his father were both disappointed in him. This felt like too much. Then, after the final battle, as he's crying over the death of Yue and how useless he felt, this exchange happened.
I stood on the sidelines while others fought and died, being the warrior I could never be.
Sokka, in a moment when she must have been scared, you made sure she wasn't alone. You don't have to be a warrior to be a hero.
Every person who wrote this and okayed this exchange should put their mouth on a tailpipe and suck. Do you have any idea how insulting this is to his character? How unnecessary this was? Would it really have been that difficult to just say you were a warrior and a hero? Or better yet, you were already a warrior, but this made you a hero. You backhand Sokka by telling him he's not a warrior, even after he already fought in combat, helped prep your troops with up-to-date info on the Fire Nation, and even helped lead Aang and Katara. You killed his character, then repeatedly beat his dead body for your own amusement. Speaking of dead bodies, Princess Yue. They changed her character to the point where she may as well have been someone else entirely. Seriously, in terms of personality traits, nothing carried over. In the original, she was a princess and acted like it. She felt like someone of importance, someone elegant. It's why the original had a feeling of the classic trope of royalty falling in love with the peasant boy. Not here. Instead, she was something like a modern-day woman, where she don't need no responsibilities. She's the one who also broke off the previous engagement with the other guy. They stripped her of any elegance and made her, as Sokka and Kentaro put it,
You are just a girl.
Did you think I wasn't a girl?
Also, she can now waterbend and can shapeshift into a fox in the spirit world. As she went to help Sokka because visions. Don't question it. Speaking of the spirit world, Hua Shi Tong showed up. He wasn't in the spirit library, however. He was just sort of hanging out. Also, Sokka and Kentaro couldn't understand him. Only Aang. This was a needless change, as they could have easily used a meditating monkey and had the same conversation. They went out of their way to break lore when they had no reason to, and this is a common theme throughout the entire show. Speaking of the spirit world, do you remember how the spirit of the forest was kidnapping people in the original? Because he was pissed the Fire Nation burned his home, and Aang had to find a way to quell his rage? Yeah, that doesn't happen here. He brings people to the spirit realm, but then it's Ko the face stealer who kidnaps everyone. That's right, the face stealer who does not steal their faces. He just kidnaps everyone. And the whole thing about showing emotions, that's gone. So Aang gets everyone back via a trade. A new small plot point that uses info from the comics. Would have actually been a cool new addition if they didn't ruin everything else. Aang gets everyone back, but unfortunately, he and the showrunners forgot about the spirit of the forest. He was never calmed. He's still gonna be snatching people up. Next character, Katara. Before diving into her, we gotta talk about some of the structures of the story in the Netflix show. To save time, they squished a lot of stories together. The storylines of getting to Omashu, Bumi, Jet, the inventor working for the Fire Nation, Iroh being kidnapped, and the secret tunnels, they were all crammed together into a single interwoven story arc. I know what you're thinking, and while the writing wasn't excellent, it could have been much worse than what we got, and I can accept the idea of doing it to save time. I have to be fair, it was, compared to the rest of the show, passable. What was not passable nor acceptable in the show is what they did to Bumi. In the original, he had a few screws loose, but there was still some element of wisdom underneath his jovial insanity. You see it in the trials he gave Aang, which served to help teach Aang a lesson and make him better. In the Netflix show, his trials were not so much to teach Aang and prepare him. Bumi has taken the black pill, and while still being out of his mind, he is now a depressed old coot. The only lessons he tries to teach Aang is how hopeless everything is. It's so bad that when an unexpected slab of stone was set to fall on Bumi, he just accepts his fate and welcomes death. Aang saves him, but Bumi lectures him about making the tough choices. If it wasn't for Sokka and Kentaro showing up last minute, which in this show, they were never taken to see Bumi, Aang would have had to either save Bumi or save himself. Bumi rambled about how awful things have been up until this point. And then, being the opposite of the original, it is Aang who teaches Bumi a lesson, making Bumi reject his black pill ways and decide to rejoin the war. I saw some people arguing about this online, and let me be perfectly clear here. Bumi was not being a mad genius in teaching Aang. Aang also figured out who he was in that first meeting. The falling stone was unexpected, as was Katara and Sokka showing up, who at this point, Bumi did not even know existed. Bumi was out of the war until Aang convinced him otherwise. The trials beforehand didn't teach Aang a thing. I am not going to accept a second interpretation of this. Other things, maybe you can argue, not this. Anyway, all of this is to lay things out before talking about Katara. She existed in the show, that's for sure, but her presence the whole time was lacking. One of the reasons for this was her lack of waterbending. At the beginning, she couldn't even make water move. Then she found out all she had to do was believe in herself. No, seriously. By episode 4 out of 8, she was still struggling to do much of anything, and just learned how to make water into ice. She had the scroll, but there were no pirates. Gran gave it to her. Because of the pace of the show, and the characters making a beeline for the Northern Water Tribe, the events from Aang waking up to the Northern Water Tribe happen in what feels like a week. Because of the structure of how they stitched things together, the only time there was a gap in events was between episodes 4 and 5, with episode 4 being when they left Tomashu. Other than this, every other episode and event felt like the following day, because it was all stitched together. In the original show, several events took place that had unknown gaps of time, where training or generic combat might have taken place. Katara was implied to have strong latent abilities when she broke open the iceberg, and the constant training and real-life battles over multiple jumps in time gave the illusion that she was naturally gaining strength and experience in ways most people would never be able to do. Reasons being they were stuck in the safety of a dojo. So her giant leaps in strength from training and experience, coupled with the fine-tuning of a master, makes the idea, in this fantasy, of her becoming a master so fast, believable. In the Netflix show, she went from barely able to handle water and just learning how to freeze it, to battling Paku and being given the title of master in what is essentially a single time skip. And here's the kicker, she never trains with Paku. Never. Not once. Not even implied. She is told to go train with someone else, which she accepts taking on the role of healer, but when she finds out she won't train in combat, that's when she gets mildly upset. There was no deservedly righteous stand against Paku and his outdated ways. It was something a lot more tame and boring. In the original, they made up and Paku became her master. In the Netflix show, we got this utterly undeserved moment.
You little peasant! You found a master, haven't you?
Yes. You're looking at her.
The original Katara was already a superb female icon for all women to look up to. Now you've made me dislike her. Thanks. And speaking of strong female characters that you butcher, Azula. In the original, she is portrayed as immensely powerful, scheming, conniving, and an overall threat that changes the dynamic of the show anytime her name is even mentioned. In the Netflix show, she just comes off as some whiny, bratty teen. First off, she sure as hell doesn't look intimidating anymore, nor does Mai. All we see her do is whine as her teenage friends give her the "oh, you're so perfect" type of pep talk. But she is frequently rebuked by her father and just doesn't really do anything. In the original, it was her father who sent her out after Zuko because he already trusts her and her power. In Netflix, she has a temper tantrum and demands she be sent out into the world to prove herself. Azula is by far my favorite female antagonist out of any fictional media. They ruined her. I'm not intimidated by her, I'm annoyed by her. Iroh was very hit and miss. I consider the portrayal to be a different but similar interpretation, and not a bad one per se, but the direction is what was really bad. There were several moments in the show that were callbacks to the original, such as Iroh asking Zuko to join him for some calming jasmine tea, which I totally did not use as an inspiration for my own jasmine tea called Iroh's Legacy. That's purely a coincidence. But instead of seamlessly weaving the moment into the show, the directors made this and several other moments feel cringy, like they were a professional wrestler priming the audience to say their catchphrase. The best example is the Cabbage Man. They twice had him almost say the line, but then be cut off by a character until finally, oh, here it comes, here's the build up. Hey, he said the thing! They did a good example of this at the end of the episode.
My cabbages!
But at the start, yeah, no thank you, this was just dumb. You might be wondering, what the hell was that tea called Iroh's Legacy that I was referring to? Well, young lads, in 2015 I launched my own tea shop called The Dragon's Treasure. Fun fact, I was originally thinking of calling it the Jasmine Dragon, but it felt way too familiar. Eventually I figured out that's what Iroh called his tea shop. Anyway, I sell loose leaf and pre-bagged anime-themed teas and tea accessories. Some of these teas, like Iroh's Legacy, pay homage to the original show, including the Red Lotus, the Earth Kingdom, and the extremely subtle tea reference that only the most hardcore fans will pick up is related to Avatar. And then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. This channel does not do outside sponsorships. This is my site, my teas. So if you would like to support this channel and these videos, or maybe you don't even give a damn about this channel and just want some delicious tea, then check out my website, linked in the description. Funding this also ensures I can keep these ads relatively short and don't need to do 5-minute ads for other people, so at least help support that. Anyway, back to the plot. Out of all the character assassination moments, I left what I think is the best for last. Aang, the Avatar, master of all 4 elements, who spent book 1, titled Water, learning the water element with Katara and through his adventures, until finally finding a master and training with that master. All of that was cut out. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Aang did not learn waterbending. He didn't even begin to learn waterbending. At least in the M. Night Shyamalan movie, he was able to do some waterbending. And that was a movie. This is a TV series with considerably longer runtime. Each episode was about 40 minutes to an hour. So if we were to compare this to the original 20 episode run, this would have been the equivalent of around 18 episodes. So with 18 episodes, and many aspects either spliced together, like all the events with Yamashu, or outright cut, such as Haku and the prisoners on the boat, the Great Valley, Aang's entire character arc, the fortune teller, the original and the Netflix show were somewhat comparable in length, but so much was pointlessly left out. I don't understand the logistics to it all. How can you cut out Aang learning waterbending? What, is he gonna just learn it off screen in between seasons? Like I mentioned at the start, there were so many things wrong with the show that each episode can probably have its own 20-minute video pointing out all the little things here and there, along with the non-stop character assassinations. The show is a failure. What makes it worse is, it really didn't need to be. They had the actual showrunners working with them, but they ignored them to the extent that they made them leave production altogether. The costume designs were top-notch. Almost every actor looked like they were bored to play their characters. And even if the delivery was sometimes off, they even sounded like the originals. CGI issues aside, the action scenes were actually good. I don't recall any moment where I thought the action looked dumb. And there were moments like Zuko vs Aang, where Zuko could not use his firebending because he'd be discovered to be a firebender, where I was legitimately excited because the fights were just really good. So the good stuff was there. The potential was there. There was something that happened last month that left me feeling depressed. And this series brought that depression to the forefront. Really stamped the reality into the idea. The Gurren Lagann movies came back to theaters, and for the first time was shown in America. Before the movies, we got to hear voice actors and directors talking about the series as a whole. From the second movie's intro, they said something that put a knife in my heart. They said that they were so passionate and loved working on Gurren Lagann so much 15 years ago that with the way things are now, no show like Gurren Lagann can be created today. This hurt because I knew it was true, and this series, the Netflix Avatar, solidified that idea for me. Because even if you have the original and still highly passionate creators of the show with you to back you up and help you, with the backing of one of the most passionate fan bases I have ever seen in my life, with Netflix and Nickelodeon money allowing you to finally make the kind of live action show the fans have been dreaming of, you still gave us this. When I started the script, I knew that part was going to be at the end, and what I hoped to do was find a way to follow it up with a happier note, to give some kind of Katara level hope speech. But I can't do that. Even Katara would lose hope at this point. I don't know what needs to happen in the world of fiction and media to cause some kind of grand reset and let love and passion be the guiding forces once again, to let people create stories that would move an entire generation. But I have lost the hope in another grand work like Avatar coming to life again. I'm writing a few stories myself, ones that I would hope would have the same type of impact as I'm sure many others would have for their own writings. I don't know. I don't know if in this day and age, such a thing would even be allowed anymore. Not much more is left to be said. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and buy yourself some tea. My last few videos have been very much on the negative side of things. I'm hoping my next one can be on the positive side. It's just a shame that if I want to bring back some positivity, I need to go back a few decades to make that happen.